Hello, my name is Avery and this is the 5th installment in my Revamped series, and today I will be talking about Rihanna's Anti album. Apologies if you can hear all of the cars passing by. I've closed the windows, but there's only so much you can do, so that might just be a little bit in the background of the video. It's currently summer vacation and I have had more time to listen to music and listen to albums that I haven't listened to before, and this is one that I have heard so much about that I feel like, at least from the fans, gets a lot of hype and gets a lot of love, but I think I had started it but never finished it before. As soon as I listened to the album all the way through, I had a feeling I was going to do a video on it, or I at least was thinking about doing a video. I mean, I haven't done one in a long time, and that is because of my last Revamped video on the Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift. To be honest, I did that video right after the album came out, and I didn't look at any reviews, I didn't look at any reactions. I just did it totally based on me and my feeling and my gut. And then after I recorded the video, edited it, posted it, everything, then I looked at reviews and reactions, and a lot of people did not like the album, were very, very critical of the album. And I felt a little bit embarrassed because I alluded to the fact that I thought some of the songs were about Joe Alwyn versus like Maddie Healy. Like, I got a lot of those wrong, and I just didn't feel great about the video. Plus, now that it's, you know, basically a year out, I think, from when I put that video out, I can say that my opinions of the album have very much changed. I've wanted to like it so badly, and so I think that definitely influenced my reaction and my video. Now, this video is not about Taylor Swift, it is about Rihanna and it is about Anti. So I will just say really quickly that if I were to do an update on the Tortured Poets video, it would just be that I think a lot of the songs are kind of forgettable and they did not have a lot of staying power. And that's all I'll say on that. Now, let's talk about my problems with the original ordering of Anti. I think that Anti opens relatively strong, but in the middle, it gets really heavy and slow, not thematically necessarily, but just a lot of the songs are relatively long and the tempos are slower and it's a lot of repetitive lines. It's not a ton of kind of evolution within the songs. It's just kind of the same thing over and over again. And I think a lot of those that had those qualities the most were kind of stuck together in the middle of the album, and so it really drug it down. Drug is drug a word? Dragged it down? You get what I'm saying. Now, because like I said, with my experience with Tortured Poets in that video, I did in fact look into some reviews and articles about Anti. So I looked at one review from the New Yorker, I looked at one review from the New York Times, both coming right after the album was released. And then I also looked at a Vanity Fair article where the artist who did the cover artwork for the project talks about kind of the meaning behind it. So I'm going to get into all of that right now as kind of a preface before we do my revamped version of the album. So let's talk about the reaction from at least this New Yorker review. I pulled a couple quotes from the article that I would like to point out. So the first quote is, "These songs do not announce themselves so much as arrive, perfuming the air with a lethargic serenity and then drifting away." And this is kind of what I talked about a lot of them being slower, very similar in tempo, and kind of repetitive. They're more so a vibe than anything that is super structured and has a lot of development. I just thought that this was a really interesting quote to describe that feeling, this lethargic serenity. Another quote that I wanted to pull from the New Yorker review was that this album, quote, "does the opposite of what we expect. It marks a rejection of the album as an artistic tentpole." I have complicated feelings about this point from, by the way, Carrie Batten is the name of the author of this particular article. I agree that this album is definitely non-traditional. It is anti expectations, and it does go in a lot of different directions. Another thing that the New York Times review will talk about. But I still, even with the original track listing, and though I obviously had some problems with the pacing, and that's the whole point that I'm, making this video, it definitely does have a structure, and you can see that. And so I personally don't think that it is rejecting the concept of, what did they say? The album as an artistic tentpole. I don't think that that's entirely how I would describe it. That's not entirely my take of the album, but I can definitely see where they got that, because it doesn't follow the typical structure, and it is kind of all over the place. But I actually think that it's one of the charming things about the album, whereas let's just say the reviewer from the New York Times did not really agree. I believe that you pronounce this author's name as John Caramanica. Sorry if I mispronounced it. He was definitely a bit more critical of the project and says that it is chaotic, it is a scattershot album. He says, quote, "It's not the product of a committed artistic vision or even an appealingly free-form aesthetic, but rather an amalgam of approaches, tones, styles, and moods." I think I'm approaching it more as what he referenced as appealingly free-form aesthetic, whereas he seems to be taking it more as just a mess. He describes it as a, quote, "patchwork approach," and especially during the last couple paragraphs of the article, I believe this was the second to last paragraph of the article, he talks about some specific songs that he has problems with and says, quote, "The lumpy desperado, the tepid never-ending, which unimaginatively borrows from Dido's Thank You, and the foggy same old mistakes, a 6-minute thick moat of pseudo chill wave bringing down this album's middle." So we actually agree and disagree again in some of these points as well. I agree about the placement of Same Old Mistakes really dragging down the album's middle, and as I said, I think a lot of the songs in the middle kind of bring it down, drag it down, and kill our momentum. However, I do not agree with some of his other descriptions of the lumpy desperado, the tepid never-ending. I actually kind of do agree with, which we'll talk about. So now we've kind of compared my critiques of the album versus some reviewers' critiques of the album, and now something that I wanted to really take into consideration when arranging this album was the original artistic intent, which obviously this is just a video that I'm making for fun, and so I can put a little bit of my artistic intent behind it. But as I mentioned, I do believe that Anti is called Anti for a reason, and I do think it is supposed to be anti-traditional album structure, and so that makes it a little bit, it feels a little wrong to then be like, let me put it in a traditional album structure. But I believe that I've hopefully still kept the essence of Anti while creating something that is a little bit less weighed down by its middle. Something that I did want to read from the Vanity Fair article with the cover artist is that it points out what the braille on the cover says. So this is what it says. "I sometimes fear that I am misunderstood. It is simply because what I want to say, what I need to say, won't be heard in a way I so rightfully deserve. What I choose to say is of so much substance that people just won't understand the depth of my message. So my voice is not my weakness. It is the opposite of what others are afraid of." I obviously think that's just really beautiful, but I think that that really speaks to what the album is about, and it really is fitting with Rihanna's brand of confidence. So now that we've done that little preface, I think it's time to get into the revamped version of the album. So first, I'm going to put the original order on the screen, and I'm just going to read it out. So it starts with Consideration featuring SZA, James Joint, Kiss It Better, Work featuring Drake, Desperado, Woo, Needed Me, Yeah I Said It, Same Old Mistakes, Never Ending, Love on the Brain, Higher, and Close to You. Now, I did not include any of the deluxe tracks because I didn't really think any of them were super valuable or brought enough to the table to be included, to be honest. And I did cut one song, and that song is Never Ending. I think that though this album does experiment with lots of different styles, lots of different sounds, and Never Ending definitely fits in that category of, it's an acoustic guitar ballad. It's very different from the rest of the project. It is the one that really felt like it just didn't fit. And I don't think that it's a strong enough song that it warrants keeping. So now we're gonna get into my revamped version of the album. First song on my revamped version of the album, get ready. It's Same Old Mistakes. Now, I feel very strongly about this, and I tried it out here, and then I just could not move it. It is a 6.5 minute long song, and that's really a lot for an opening track. You know, usually they're shorter, there's some type of intro, but if this album is all about anti-tradition and anti-expectations, I think that what better way to start it off than with doing something really out of the norm and starting with the longest song on the project. The vocals are not super present, they're kind of in the back, and there's just so many overlapping layers of vocals that it feels to me like one big long fade in. I do think that the last iteration of the chorus could be cut, and that might make it an even stronger introduction, but as it is, I still think that it works. I also like a couple of the lines as an intro, like the chorus starts as "feel like a brand new person," and just come on, it's just the simplistic things like starting an album with feeling like a brand new person, like this is new, we're entering, you know, there's something different and new, right? That it just feels fitting for the beginning. And there's also the very important line, two sides of me can't agree. And then the overlapping vocals are essentially, I feel like, an argument with herself, and one voice says one thing, the other one negates it, and it says the opposite thing. And I think that that really sets up the tone for the album as well, because like the New York Times especially pointed out, there is a lot of different styles, and I think you can take it as a mess, or I think you can take it as it kind of being the point that there are these sides of her that can't agree. And what do you do when there's all of these different styles, but they all are Rihanna? And to make an album that doesn't include all of those wouldn't feel like her. So that's why I've decided to start with Same Old Mistakes. Now, to get to number 2 in my revamped version, it's going to be Needed Me. This is, I feel, maybe more similar to a traditional album structure, with having what I would have as, you know, a single. I believe this was a single, be the second track, but we do need something a little bit snappier. And this one isn't really like snappy because it's not super fast. We need something that is catchy and something that is easily digestible, coming off of this kind of massive opening. Not massive in dynamics, but massive in length, and just, it's a commitment, that first one. So this gives us a little bit of a breather. I think that I considered putting James Joint in the second position as it is on the original track listing, because it's obviously the shortest song, and so it would definitely give the breather, but it just felt very abrupt to me, and that placement just didn't feel right. I also thought about putting Work here because it's the other single, but I don't love to have features this early in the album, because I personally like to let us get kind of settled and situated with the artist that we're focusing on before we introduce features. And I also felt like it was just a bit jarring, and so Needed Me provided this perfect balance of all the factors that I was looking for. Now on to track number 3, which is actually the same as the original track listing, just with different songs preceding it. Track number 3 in my revamped version is Kiss It Better. Now, I haven't really done reviews of the other two, but let me just say Kiss It Better is my favorite song on the album. My favorite song on the album. The guitar is so good, like the vibe is just so good. Hey, fuck your pride, just to get on back, to get on back. That part, I love it. I love it for life. It is amazing. It being my favorite, it was kind of scary, kind of nerve-wracking to try and place it in the album because I wanted it to get the time and the spotlight that it deserved. I put it after Needed Me in this track 3 spot because we need to keep the energy up, right? And I'm not trying to use all of the high energy songs at the beginning because, like I said, that was the problem in the last one. And so I needed to space them out a bit. But I think that Kiss It Better is so much fun. Even though it's not a fast song, it's so much fun. It's got so much attitude and so much angst to it that it's just, oh, I love it. For some reason, every time I tried to put it in the back half of the album, it just felt wrong. It just felt like it should be at the front. And it's like, we get into Needed Me, vibes are already good, vibes are already high. And then we go into Kiss It Better and we just keep riding that wave. And I've talked a lot about momentum, I feel like. Momentum of an album in previous videos, but I feel like having good momentum, strong momentum that you can sustain throughout an album is crucial to the listening experience. And I think that Kiss It Better is just the perfect song to maintain the momentum that we got from Need Me. Track number 4 on my revamped version is Consideration featuring SZA. So I mentioned before that personally, I like to wait to have songs with features until a little bit into the album. And in the original track listing, Consideration starts the project. And I don't know, I kind of understand why it is that way, but it's Rihanna's album. It's Rihanna's album, and I want to hear Rihanna speak. I want to hear Rihanna's voice first before we start introducing other artists like SZA, even though SZA is amazing. Personally, this song is not my favorite. It's okay. It's like fine, you know, and I don't skip it, but it's not in my top ones. I also think that it keeps the energy high, but the feel is so different on this one that it keeps things interesting as well. So that's another reason why I placed it in this number 4 slot. And then we have the transition from Consideration into my track 5, which is James Joint. And I remember putting together my order and thinking, oh, I really love the way that, you know, Consideration has this abrupt end and then James Joint has this abrupt start. They feel like they go together. And then eventually I realized that this is the original order on the actual version of the album. I just moved them down to slots 4 and 5 rather than 1 and 2. So obviously the transitions work together because that they're supposed to. It was difficult to try and put these in any other order because of the abrupt end of Consideration and the abrupt start of James Joint. So I do think that they make sense as a pair. I also like putting James Joint here because of the track that comes after it. James Joint ends with the line, "Don't care why, just know I love you." And then we move into my track number 6, which is Love on the Brain, which is obviously all about this toxic love. And I think that James Joint is the perfect transition into this because it's very, you know, we're gonna ignore all of that. Just whatever, just, yeah, I love you, right? And then Love on the Brain is about this toxic love, or at least this very intense love. I mean, it says, no matter what I do, it beats me black and blue. And I just feel like maybe that's not what a healthy love looks like. But again, we're kind of in this Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care. I was about to say la la la, I don't care, but I feel like la 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 is not really Rihanna's vibe. It's like she's fully conscious of it. She just doesn't care at all. Love on the Brain is iconic. Love on the Brain is a classic. I think it's a great song. It's not the closest thing we get to a ballad on here, but it's one of the few ones that really feels ballad-esque, and it's got so much power behind it. And like this, I feel, is how a Rihanna ballad should sound, as opposed to the one that I cut. What is it called? Literally, what is it called? Never Ending. Yeah. So we get this kind of ballad-esque song, and then we move into my track number 7, which is Yeah, I Said It. And to me, this one is the one that feels the most like an interlude, and so I put it essentially in the middle of the project. And going back to the New Yorker review, where they talk about rejecting the album as an artistic tentpole, I have problems with it because Yeah, I Said It to me feels very interlude-esque. I keep going blah blah blah-esque, but you get the point. It very much sounds like an interlude, and it's also in the middle of the project on the original track listing. I mean, it is slightly different. It is number 8, but it also has one more track, so it really is, again, in the middle. And so that to me demonstrates that Rihanna or her team, you know, understands that this kind of serves the purpose of an interlude, even though it is longer than an interlude would be. Just the repetitive nature of it, something about the production in it gives me the feel that it is a transition. And I feel that Love on the Brain kind of closes out that side of the album anyways, and so we need to transition into the back half of the project. And I feel that Yeah, I Said It is kind of that turning point between side A, side B. So then we get into the first track of side B, or you know, what I consider the back half of the album. That is number 8, Desperado. I love Desperado. In the New York Times article, he called it lumpy. You sound grumpy. Okay, that was like, I thought of it and I was like, no, and then I said it anyways. I think it's great. I love Desperado, and it brings the energy up post interlude, and it's something about the beginning of this track makes it feel like the beginning. Like I could hear this being the first track actually, but I think it also works as the first track of the back half, because I was never gonna move Same Old Mistakes. No. Once I decided on that, that was it. And I love the line, there ain't nothing here for me anymore, but I don't want to be alone. Like, it is continuing the themes of toxic love, toxic relationships. Again, I feel like she is in awareness of it in the first half, but now it's very like calling attention directly to it, and there is less this haze of like love. Like there's no feeling like it's love, pretending like it's love. Like we know that it's not love, and its only purpose is really to make her feel less alone, as it says in the song. Now that I'm looking at this, I'm realizing that I did structure the back half of the album very similar to how I structured the first half of the album, because the 9th song and the 2nd song in the back half is Work featuring Drake, which is the single that I was talking, the other single song. I think that we needed to save Work for this back half of the project, because we need something faster in order to keep this momentum alive and not have it sag in the middle. It provides that perfect pick-me-up right when you need it. Also, because it was a single, I think that it is great to put it in this back half, because it provides the listener with something familiar, something that they probably already know, and that can be helpful to keep the listener listening. And I also think that it is a good distance away from the other song with a feature, and that's another thing that can re-engage interest if people are kind of feeling it at this point in the album. Okay. I'm laughing at my notes for this because number 10 is Woo. And in my notes, I say, literally do not know how to explain besides the vibe was right. The transition felt right and the vibes felt right. Need I say any more? Again, it's very similar to the first half of the album where you get this momentum, like you get this burst of energy from the single, and then you want to keep that, you want to ride that wave. Woo is just, it's slower, don't get me wrong, but it's so confident, and I love the way that the vocals are distorted, and it's just so in your face that it's hard to ignore, and it's a sound that we haven't gotten yet on the project. And so again, it engages your interest, it keeps you here, it keeps you locked into the project and stops you from getting bored. And again, I love the evolution of the lyrics. It has the lyric, I don't even really care about you no more. And so we're in this, you know, again, there's this two sides that are mentioned in Same Old Mistakes at the beginning now. There's two sides that are fighting. One of them's like, I'm in love, and the other one's like, girl, no. And so I think between this first half of the project and this second half, we kind of get that back and forth of like, I'm in love and whatever, I don't care if it's toxic, it's love. And then the second half is like, this is not love. And I mean, I guess Needed Me is in the first half, so it doesn't all follow that, but I think overall the first half is a little more lovey and the second half is a little more until we get to these last two. I have kept the last two tracks in the same order as the original. So number 11 is Higher. This one is also relatively short, which I like, and we're kind of coming down from the energy of Work into Woo. I also love the lyric in Higher that says, I just really need your ass with me, I'm sorry about the other night, which I think works really well, again, moving from Woo into Higher, because Woo is, like I said, the line, I don't even really care about you no more. And then we get into Higher that says, I'm sorry about the other night. It feels like she's like apologizing for the things that she said and the way that she acted in Woo. We get this winding down a bit with Higher. And then we get the only song that could close this album, the song that does close this album on the standard edition, number 12, Close to You. I think this is such a lovely ballad. I think that it's beautiful. I think that it's vulnerable, and it's so simplistic, but that just adds to its beauty. I think that Rihanna sounds great on it, and I think, again, this is a style of ballad that works for her. And I'm just a sucker for a good piano ending, and this track ends with some really nice piano. One last thing I'll say about Close to You, there is a 20-second fade out, and like half of that is complete silence, which I kind of love. It's crazy to me. It's so long. Like, you're like, oh my god, the song has been over forever, but it's still playing. But I love it as a closer too, because if you're looping the album, having this 20-second fade out and this extended period of silence at the end forces you to like sit with the album before it just loops back to the top. It forces you to have that space. So yes, that is my revamped version of Anti by Rihanna. I enjoy a lot of this project, and I think that just with this kind of simple reordering and restructuring of the project, it makes it stronger. I think the pacing is better. Like I've talked about, I think the momentum is maintained throughout, and it kind of ebbs and flows in a bit more natural way that keeps you engaged, despite the fact that a lot of the songs on the project are slower. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see when the next one comes out. If the next one comes out, I really do these only if inspiration strikes. Sorry for all of the noise that's been happening. Hopefully it's not too distracting from my super intelligent, super put together and well-spoken thoughts and opinions on Anti by Rihanna. All right, until next time, bye.